They're smaller than your fingernail and etched in silicon. And right now, semiconductors are at the heart of the most important geopolitical rivalry of our time, one that could likely decide who wins and who leads in the 21st century. This is the chip war, and it's reshaping the global balance of power. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Global Insights, where we use international relations and political economy to unpack today's headlines. I'm Noah Zerbe, professor of global politics at Cal Poly Humboldt. In this episode, we're exploring the escalating conflict between the United States and China over control of what many experts consider to be the world's most critical resource, microchips. This isn't just another trade dispute, it's a full-scale contest for technological supremacy, economic leverage, and national security. And it's playing out in factories, summit rooms, and the digital infrastructure that powers our daily lives, from Washington to Beijing. In recent months, Beijing has escalated its push to replace American technology, directing its largest firms to prioritize homegrown AI chips and placing severe restrictions on future purchases of advanced American semiconductors. In response, the U.S. has tightened its own export controls and pressed allies to do the same. Meanwhile, high-level trade talks between the two powers have repeatedly stalled. But behind the headlines lies a deeper story. This standoff is a textbook example of what political scientists often refer to as economic statecraft, the strategic use of trade, investment, and innovation to project power and to try to constrain rivals. So, in this episode, we'll explore three big ideas that help us make sense of what's happening here. First, we'll look at how states weaponize economic tools. That's economic statecraft. Then we'll consider why nations are racing to achieve technological self-reliance, or what we might call technological sovereignty. Finally, we'll discuss how the tiny island in East Asia, Taiwan, has become the single most important choke point in the global economy. So buckle up, because the future of global power may indeed be written in silicon. So how do we make sense of all this? The story of the chip war really revolves around three critical ideas in global politics. First up, economic statecraft, using tools like sanctions, export controls, or tariffs to achieve strategic global goals. And that's exactly what we're seeing in the chip war. Over the last several years, the U.S. has imposed increasingly strict controls on exports of advanced semiconductors and chip-making equipment to China, especially AI chips from companies like NVIDIA. These chips power everything from smartphones to cloud computing to surveillance systems and military AI. The logic is simple. If the U.S. can control access to cutting-edge technologies, it can shape China's long-term strategic trajectory. However, China's pushing back. In September, regulators in Beijing ordered the country's top tech firms to cancel all purchase of NVIDIA H20 chips, not just future deals, but existing contracts as well. It's not retaliation, it's a calculated move to accelerate China's push for self-reliance. And this is economic statecraft in action, a battle fought not with bullets, but through supply chains. And it's not new. In the Cold War, the U.S. used grain embargoes to pressure the Soviet Union. In more recent years, sanctions on Iran and Russia have targeted entire economic sectors. What's changed here is the strategic centrality of semiconductors, not just for economic growth, but for AI development, cyber capabilities, and even national defense. It's also a powerful example of what scholars refer to as the weaponization of interdependence, a topic we've discussed in earlier episodes. Globalization created intertwined supply chains for efficiency, but today that interdependence is being turned into a tool of economic coercion. And now that tool is being wielded on both sides. In recent weeks, Beijing has gone on the offensive, launching anti-dumping probes into American legacy chips, opening antitrust investigations into NVIDIA, and accusing U.S. industrial policy of unfair discrimination. These legacy chips, which power everything from cars to washing machines, are a domain where Chinese firms have largely caught up. This makes them a prime target for retaliatory tariffs and a warning shot that continued U.S. pressure could come at a cost. And this marks a significant shift. For years, it was Washington that pioneered new tools to cut off Chinese firms from advanced chips, export bans, investment reviews, even personnel restrictions. But now China is turning to those same tools and using them back against the United States, using its vast consumer and manufacturing markets as leverage. It's a classic case of mirror diplomacy. Beijing is responding in kind, strategically, but symbolically. Political scientists call this kind of strategy issue linkage, using pressure in one area, like chip exports, to extract concessions in another, like TikTok or tariffs. It's a risky but increasingly common feature of 21st century economic diplomacy. And that brings us to our second concept, technological sovereignty. The idea that national power depends on controlling access to foundational technologies. For China, this has become a top priority. Under its Made in China 2025 strategy, Beijing has invested hundreds of billions of dollars to build a self-sufficient semiconductor industry, and the results are beginning to emerge. Huawei recently announced a 3-year roadmap for its Ascend AI chips, aiming to launch new processors annually through 2028. Alibaba is investing over $50 billion in AI infrastructure, with its T-Head division supplying chips for major Chinese firms like Unicom. These aren't just corporate strategies, they're geopolitical ones. Beijing sees control over advanced computing as essential to its long-term security and competitiveness. The U.S., for its part, has its own sovereignty push. The CHIPS and Science Act, signed in 2022, allocates more than $50 billion in subsidies to support domestic semiconductor manufacturing. President Trump has gone even further, leveraging tariffs and diplomatic pressure in an effort to push firms like TSMC to expand fabrication in the United States. But there's a problem. This is all wildly expensive, and no country has yet achieved full chip independence. As Chris Miller argues in his book Chip War, neither side is close to breaking free. China still lags behind in advanced fabrication, and the US still relies on East Asian fab for most advanced chips. But Miller argues that technological sovereignty is no longer optional, it's existential. A country that can't design and produce its own chips risks being digitally dependent on geopolitical rivals. And that's why this competition is intensifying, not just between the US and China, but in Europe, South Korea, India, and beyond. This isn't just economic policy, it's the foundation of geopolitical power moving into the 21st century. And that brings us to the most precarious piece of the puzzle, supply chain vulnerability and the central role of Taiwan. Taiwan is home to TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, which produces about 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors. That makes Taiwan not just a tech hub, but an important node for the entire global economy. And it also makes it a flashpoint. If conflict broke out across the Taiwan Strait, a blockade, a cyber attack, or an invasion, it could cut off access to the world's most advanced chips. And the effects would ripple across everything from smartphones to defense systems to cloud infrastructure to the global financial system. As Chris Miller puts it, TSMC is the Achilles heel of globalization. Just one factory complex outside Taipei could determine the fate of entire industries. That's partially why the US has pushed TSMC to build new fabs in Arizona. It's why Germany and Japan are investing in their own chip infrastructure. And it's partially why Beijing continues to view Taiwan as both a political and technological prize. Because this war isn't just about silicon, it's about sovereignty, security, and who sets the rules of the global order. What we're witnessing isn't just a trade fight, it's a new kind of conflict, fought with algorithms instead of armies and tariffs instead of tanks. The chip war reflects a broader transformation in global politics, where industrial policy, market access, and innovation capacity are increasingly becoming as important as raw military power. So, what do we take away from all this? At first glance, the chip war might seem like a tech story, a business dispute between superpowers. But look closer and it reveals something much, much bigger, a world order being written not by armies, but by algorithms and fabs. We've seen how both the US and China are turning markets into weapons, each side using its regulatory and economic pressure not only to defend its own interests, but to try to reshape the behavior of its geopolitical rivals. We've explored how technological sovereignty is becoming a key pillar of national strategy. And we've seen how fragile supply chains, particularly in Taiwan, make globalization a system built on a fault line. This is why the chip war matters. It's not just about who builds faster processors. It's a new great power competition where dominance in semiconductor technology shapes future military, economic, and ideological power. But it also expresses a core contradiction of globalization. We created an efficient global supply chain, but without resilience to protect it from geopolitical risk. So here's the question. Are we headed towards a bifurcated world where China and the U.S. build rival tech spheres? Or will interdependence prove too sticky to be fully unwound? And how should allies in Europe, India, and across the global south navigate this increasingly polarized technological landscape? These are the questions we need to be asking because the future of global power isn't being decided by tanks on the battlefield, but in transistors on a microchip. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Global Insights. If you have any questions, please leave those in the comments section below. And as always, thanks for watching.